everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Stud.
And I'm Ron Stud.
And Ron, this is a very special episode. We have hit...
It is. I mean, let's be honest. I think every one of our episodes is special. But this is the big double digits. This is 10, right?
Double digits. We hit 10. I don't know if when we first started this, we kind of, I don't know about you, I didn't have any expectations. I said, let's do a podcast. Let's bring some people on. I'm pretty good at talking. I can talk to a brick wall. Let's bring some people on, have some fun. But I don't know. This could peter out after 3 episodes. But we're on 10, and we wanted to kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, this is sort of a recap episode. We don't have a guest on per se tonight, but it's an opportunity for Ron and I to kind of reflect on what we've done so far and kind of talk about where we want to take this podcast as we kind of move on into the double digits, right? And who knows? Are we gonna get the triple digits someday, Ron?
You never know.
You never know.
But I mean, heck, we're 1/10 of the way there already. Which, hey, that's something.
There you go. Hey, Ron, I think this is something we haven't done in a while because of a lot of our newer guests haven't been able. They don't have access to Malort. So I feel like in honor of this recap, we should kind of get back to basics, back to our roots.
Yeah.
Let's have a shot of Malort.
All right, I've already got mine poured, so let's do it. Bottoms up.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
So tasty.
Yep, you said it.
So it's funny.
Definitely very herbal.
So I want to talk about the guests we've had on so far, but I'm actually it's one of those things when we're hosting a podcast. And we have our guest, and they're the center of attention, right? We're throwing out ideas and asking them questions. We haven't actually talked about you or me since episode 2. How are you doing? I heard you just got yourself a little mini fridge.
That's right. I decided that I needed to treat myself to something small and something special. And as we're all stuck at home in the office, and as I've been, I don't know, too European lately, where I've just been drinking my seltzer water at room temperature, I decided, Ron, it's time to spend a few dollars. It wasn't much. I got a special on Amazon, and I've got a special fridge that holds 6 cans.
Wow.
So, yeah. So it's in my office now, and that's been something a little bit nice where I'm like, all right, I'm going to have some cold seltzer water today. So that's been something I've been doing. I think, as you mentioned, for this podcast, we've been definitely really focusing on our guests, which is appropriate. But I think, too, this episode, it might be kind of good to kind of give some folks a little bit of a recap on where we're at, where we've been, where we're going, and maybe also talk a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes, because I think some people are interested. But to echo what you were saying earlier, I'm with you. I don't think initially we thought we would have really that many listeners. I think this was more of a selfish project in some ways, just to kind of talk to friends and people that we know. And why not let others listen in, because they may enjoy it. And I think we've been honestly surprised at the listeners. We've received a number of listeners from, frankly, all over the world, and not just in the countries of our guests either. Or international listeners especially.
I was going to say, unless someone's messing with us with a VPN of some sort, we've had a ton of guests, relatively speaking, from all over Europe and Asia, right?
Listeners, but yes.
What did I say?
You said guests.
Oh, yes.
It's okay.
We've had tons of listeners from all over Europe and Asia.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing. I don't know how far they're listening into it, but frankly, hey, it's just nice to kind of see some listeners from across the pond.
Yeah. So, I do have a question, Ron, because I got in. Sure. I want to go back to what you just talked about. You just wanted to glaze right over the wonderful world of seltzer. It's funny. I never liked seltzer until I moved to Boston. It's a really big thing in Boston before it became like a nationwide phenomenon, in my opinion. Do you drink just regular? Unflavored? Do you like fruit flavored? What do you normally drink? It sounds like you're having them in cans. So
Yeah.
do you have them flavored?
So I have like the flavored, but without any calories and no sweetener.
Yeah. I know what you're
So
talking about. Yeah. Not
yeah.
the artificial sweetener crap. I'm talking just the natural flavors. What do you got?
So I've got two cans in front of me. I've got bubbly, right?
Yeah.
They're lime bubbly, which that one's good, you know. The other one I've got is Aha, which that's like Coke launched that brand, and the one that I really like of Aha is it's called Black Cherry and Coffee.
Yes, I had that one with you. Let me ask you, are you
Yes.
double fisting right now? Do you have two seltzers open at the same time?
No, I've got the one open, but the other's ready in anticipation of needing it.
Oh, you were anticipating the needing that much of a thirst with this podcast.
Yes.
I
Yes.
see.
I mean, I want to make sure that we're definitely talking a little bit more. I think that sometimes I feel bad for our guests. They almost feel like they're kind of steering the episode with the amount of talking that they're doing, and in some ways they are. But when we're talking, I definitely need to make sure that I'm properly hydrated, right?
That's absolutely true. So, well, that's good. I think I'm glad you got that refrigerator because I think during COVID, we're still in the thick of it. Although things seem
Yeah.
to be getting a little bit better, I'm crossing my fingers. But even with all that, it's like we have to find a reward in something, right? Something that is exciting. I know for me, I finally got my Cutco knives. I convinced my wife Hannah to let me get the block. And so
Mm,
that's exciting because I told her it's gonna be like for those who don't know, Cutco knives are wonderful knives. They actually are made where Ron and I grew up, but they're very expensive. And so
right.
unless you have a couple $1,000s to lay down, you're gonna probably buy individual knives over time. And so I said, Hannah, this is like a fun hobby, right? Where it's like you get a stamp book and you slowly over time you're able to fill up the stamp book with stamps. Apply
Hmm.
that but for knives. And I feel like that's exactly what this is. Like now I got like 4 or 5 knives, but this block I'm getting can hold 18 knives. And so over
Oh,
time, I got the same exact block as you, but over
nice.
time I can fill this up. And it kind of encourages me to, do a little bit more cooking around the house.
I love it. Yeah, that's something that I don't know. I've probably talked to a lot of people about Cutco, and I think unfortunately a lot of people kind of have this negative impression of Cutco. They're like, "Oh, well, they're expensive," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's lifetime warranty." Oh, but they kind of have this weird sales model, and I'm like, "Yeah, but they're really good. They make them here in the U.S. I actually we grew up about 2 blocks away from the factory,
Yes.
and I was always impressed with what they did in Olean. The elementary school we went to, they had a partnership with them, and just overall very stand up business the way that they run things. And the thing that I love with Cutco knives, and I guess I was probably about your same kind of point maybe 8 years ago, Alex, where it's like, you know, why not start collecting some of those knives? Yeah, as you said, you're not going to just go out and buy them all. But on the other hand, I think it really makes a nice impression when you have friends or guests over to say, here you go, use these steak knives.
Yes, absolutely, and there is a huge difference in the quality. But I deal with the same issue you deal with. I think
Mm-hmm.
there is this stigma, and it's because of their historic sales model, which was
Mm-hmm.
very much, the door-to-door salesperson. And I think a lot of people, even now, still associate Cutco with some sort of pyramid scheme, multi-level marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, in its origin, it could be interpreted that way, right? Because the idea is you're getting kids, most of them, in college age, who, you get this really nice set. And, what really sells Cutco knives is seeing it in person, right? Seeing
Right.
how it can slice anything. I mean, like the shears that you and I have can literally cut through a penny, right?
Yep.
And there's no damage at it of the knife. So I think there's this like, oh, this is gimmicky. I have a guy who's at my door selling me this, and wait, he had to invest in this set, and he's getting people. But it's like, no, if you really understand it, it's just the idea of seeing a demonstration before you're going to spend $100 on a knife.
Yep. 100%. And I don't know, it's definitely kind of maybe a bit of a throwback model. But yeah, it's the way I look at it is it the best knife in the world? I don't know. I doubt that. But I can tell you, we've taken our knives back a few times for free sharpening and I think in some cases where it was like stained or something, I'm pretty sure they legit just gave us a whole new knife.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know many businesses that would stand by that kind of product, and they are made in the US. So I don't know. One thing I did, I don't know, we're kind of going off on a bit of a tangent, but why not just keep rolling while we're at it? Is for Christmas, what I've done for some of my siblings is give them a knife that's engraved from Cutco. And, the thing is, it's like, I don't know, for Christmas and the holidays, how many of us get gifts where we're like, oh, yeah, that was a gift that you gave me that one year? It never really happens, right? But if you give somebody a nice Cutco knife, it's like, it's practical. They'll have it. And if you get it engraved, well, then they'll remember exactly what they got it for. So I think, Alex, you've got a few from me that way. And
Yes, I do.
was the this year was the first year I got one from you. So I think it's pretty cool.
It is. It is. So, that's certainly a hobby that I've been doing and trying to cook a little bit more, which certainly my wife is not disappointed by that. So, other than that, though, I'm just, trying to stay warm. I don't know if you've been following the weather up in the actually all over the country has been a
Yeah.
complete mess. But I'm sure it's been nice being down in Georgia. How's the weather down there?
Well, I think today it reached a temperature of about 50. It was
Ooh,
sunny. I think we're due for some rain though. But I mean, we've definitely had a lot of cold days. It's been very cloudy lately. But you know, I think back to some of our discussions over our podcast about Western New York and the weather they're having up there. And you know what? I'm happy. I mean, it's not always the best weather anywhere, but you know what? It's not that cold, so I'm happy.
well, I've always believed this, that no matter where you live in the world, pick your poison, right?
Hmm.
Pick something that you're okay with, because, hey, listen, you might say, well, Alex, Southern California is beautiful. It's on a freaking fault line. I love Southern
Right.
California, but one of these days, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
That's when, yeah.
Which is sad. I'm not, but that's the reality. There are places probably like in Georgia where you are, where sure you have mild winters, but the summers can get absolutely beastly.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Wherever you live, it's all about just finding what works for you. Even like, we had a guest on from Singapore. Singapore's great because, hey, it's 90 degrees all year round. But you go through a rainy season and you don't see any snow and
Well,
you only have one season.
yes, and I remember you telling me that after you lived there for a year, and it took me a little bit to like understand, like, wait, you don't experience all four seasons? I mean, like
Nope.
the Northeast is the epitome of all four seasons. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's even when I moved to Texas, I thought that was a little strange because it was you had a colder and then a warmer. It's probably climate not too dissimilar from Atlanta, but even that, I guess I kind of got used to it. I was sort of like almost yearning for the trees to change colors, and those processes which um you know don't always happen. So at the end of the day, I think you do have to just accept, hey, wherever you are, there's probably some pros and there's probably some cons.
Yep.
So
I think that's nature's way of balancing things.
yeah.
You just got to figure out what you're all right with. And in some ways, I don't know, this is kind of hokey, but I think that's kind of like choosing a significant other, right? There's things about your significant other that are good and bad in all relationships. And it's about finding like, oh, hey, yeah, maybe this is a little bit weird about that person, but you know what? Complements me perfectly, and you know what? We make each other better because of it.
Yeah. Well,
That's good.
well, and we all learn from one another, and I think that's a really good segue into. I'd love to spend a few minutes, Ron, getting your thoughts to some of the guests we've had on so far. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been really blessed that from a geography standpoint, we were just talking about the weather, but it's like, wait, we've had guests from Portland, Oregon, to
Right.
Singapore, to Buffalo, New
Buffalo.
York. Yeah. And, they've been all over and they've all had very different careers, right? From everything from a
Hmm.
chef to executive producer, graphic designer, a puppeteer, right? I mean, it's been a
Yep.
really interesting experience meeting these people. there were several people that we've spoken with that we brought on our show that you had never met before, and vice versa.
Sure.
So,
And I think that's been definitely one of the cool parts about this is the people that we know. There's a lot of people that you know that I don't know, and vice versa. And getting to know them, it's also kind of an interesting reflection on you as well as me. Getting to know, oh, hey, that's an interesting person that you know or I know, and I think that kind of helps kind of complete a really kind of fun podcast in some ways.
well,
It says something about us either
I
way.
was going to ask you about that, Ron. I was going to say, maybe this is a little cheesy, but what do you think you've learned more about me as someone you've known your entire life through some of the guests that are my friends?
Hmm, that's a tough one. Yeah, because I mean that's something where I've definitely reflected that like all of the guests that I've really kind of brought on so far, they've definitely had like an artistic slant to them. I don't know what that says about me,
Well,
but
I
there
I
you
was
go.
going to say that when I was thinking about that question as it relates to you, I was going to
Yeah.
say, not that this is necessarily a surprise, but Ron, I think you take this as a compliment. I think you're a little bit nerdier than I am. I
Sure.
think you have some friends who have some real interests and passions, and they are experts in very specific
Mm,
things, whether it's comics or what have you. And I think that's a
hmm.
reflection of your ability to have friends with a lot of different interests, and you can kind of go toe to toe, so to speak, and talk with them. You
Hmm.
know a little bit about everything.
Well, thank you. And I would say like I think that's echoed as well with a lot of your friends. I think maybe not quite as nerdy, and but I would say that you've definitely got like a very eclectic mix of friends with different passions and interests. So, for instance, Ruben, what he knows with culinary arts, what he does with podcasting, which I think he's launched another podcast, which is awesome. It was in the news the other day. I saw about his podcast. Was it Men Who Cry?
Yes, and I got to say, he
Yeah.
is absolutely not only a good podcaster, but he is a showman at promoting his show because to
Oh,
what you just
yeah.
said, it was in the local news, like literally in the
Hmm.
newspaper in Delaware. And Ron, I've been running our Instagram page, but I promise you, uh, our podcast has not been promoted in the Chicago Tribune. I'm sorry.
I'm a little disappointed, but I'm sure someday we'll aspire to get there. But to be fair, Ruben, I think, has also been sort of a mentor to us to kind of be like, oh, here's how you can do things. Here's some ideas. And I think kicking him off with our first guest was a really cool move because I think he's taught us a lot. And he definitely helped me with, like, oh, that's how you do that. And, what's cool too is I think even our show in some ways is inspiring some folks. So, our last guest, Mark, he had told me on the side that one of the things that he took away from doing our podcast was he was like, you know what? I'm actually going to start my own podcast with some folks that he'd been talking to about it. And he's like, that was fun. I like what we did there. I want to do my own.
That's awesome.
And I was like, wow, to hear that somebody wants to do that as just, having this one experience with us. I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Well, I think when we interviewed Matt Toll, who was the executive producer,
Hmm.
he talked about what makes podcasts so unique in that, hey, you can have a really eccentric following, but there's
Hmm.
going to be people out there who are interested, right? Which is so different from radio, where historically you had to rely on your specific market. You had to think,
Hmm.
well, okay, if we have a radio station in Atlanta, I have to appeal to people in Atlanta. Are there enough people interested in comics, in the case of Mark,
Right.
in Atlanta? Well, maybe
Hmm.
not, but oh, wait, if you can pull from the whole internet, the whole world, you're going to find a huge following. So
Hmm.
I think it's been a lot of fun as we're kind of figuring it out as we go. I mean, and Ruben has absolutely been a mentor for us as we kind of get by and get through our 10th episode. I mean, even the recording platform we're using, Anchor, is
Yep.
something Ruben introduced us to, and that is the way we're actually Ron is doing all of the recording and editing of our podcasts.
So let's, I mentioned we were going to talk a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes. Let's kind of set folks up with how we do that. So usually one of the things that Alex and I do is we coordinate with guests. So we'll start off with, hey, would you like to be a guest on the show? And I think that's kind of where if somebody says, sure, I'd be happy to, that's kind of when we then try to figure out, okay, let's schedule them for a time that works well for all of us. And then at that point, we also put together basically a tentative
Yeah,
script
it's like an
where it's
outline, right?
basically, right. And our idea on that really is it's enough to kind of prep our guests with here's what we're probably going to ask. And then we definitely go off of that. So something that Alex says or something I say or something that our guest says will often prompt additional questions where it's like, hey, that's interesting that you said that. Did you know this? And then that'll lead to a different tangent. So we wrap that up with the actual recording. And then the other thing that we do is after we record it, Hannah, Alex's wife, she graciously has been putting together these wonderful thumbnails for our episodes. So thank you, Hannah. Does she listen, by the way?
Yes, she does.
Oh, well, hello, Hannah. Thank you for
We
being
will have
awesome.
to bring her on.
And then,
Actually, it's funny. I was actually just talking to her to obviously my wife. I was talking to her today
yeah.
about how we were going to record this episode, and she said, at some point, because I've tried to get her on or interested, and she's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm that interesting. Blah blah blah. I said, she said to me, well, you know what? Maybe we could get on and do an episode where we talk about what is it like planning a wedding during COVID. And I said that would
Ooh,
absolutely be a good episode. So, I'm
that would be.
hoping, little sneak peek, I'm hoping we can get her on for a future episode. But I digress.
No, but that would be a good episode. So let's put that on the calendar as part of our process that we just described. And then we also put together the show with some editing. So that's where Alex has mentioned it a few times. I go through and stumble my way through editing. And once we get that all edited, and that's really kind of just removing a lot of the ums, uhs, and where we're talking over each other and trying to clean things up as much as I can. That's where we then will cut to, we upload it on Anchor and it gets posted. And we try to aim for that Tuesday, but as I said, we've kind of run into a few snags with a few recent recordings. But with this episode, we're going to start trying to kind of build up a little bit of a queue. So I've got a full week of additional time to take care of editing. So with that, we're hoping that we're going to be much better with releasing on time I'm hoping every week Tuesday at noon, because I figure that's kind of a good time, right?
I agree, and I think we can aim for that, especially if we have that queue where we have a couple episodes already lined up. So,
Yep.
hey Ron, why don't we take a quick break? And when we come back, I want to hear all about kind of where your vision is in terms of what do you maybe want to change as we go into episode 11 and beyond, and maybe some sneak peeks into future guests.
Sure. Sounds good to me. All right. Well, we'll be right back. Are you enjoying yourself some Between Two Studs? Well, I know I am. Well, good news. If you want to reach out to us, we've got ourselves a new email address, between@twostuds.com. Send us an email, and who knows, maybe we'll read your letter on the air. Talk to you soon. Thank you, Alex, for sticking around through the break, not going anywhere. Appreciate it.
Can you imagine if I waited till the recap episode and then I just said I'm done? I didn't know that was an option. I need to think about that. I can just go away for a while and come back in the middle of an episode.
I mean, you could. I mean, the good part about a recap episode like this is you're not going to offend any guest. You're just going to offend your brother, which
Well,
it happens. I've offended you. It's all good, right?
yeah, I was gonna say, especially after I'm currently drinking Jaeger, so after enough Jaeger, I'm sure I'll offend you, and that's okay. Hey, so on a serious note, Ron, I am curious to your take on, hey, we've done 10 episodes now, if you count this one. We've done 7 guests. What would you, well, let me start with this. What has surprised you the most about doing a podcast?
I don't know. I mean, it's weird because I can think of a number of different podcasts I've listened to over the years. I want to kind of give some shouts out to This Week in Tech with Leo Laporte definitely some of the really kind of crazy off the wall ones with Martin Sargent over the years. And there's been a number of like special interest podcasts. And I think one of the things as a person standing on the sides, it's kind of interesting the level of professionalism that you hear from different podcasts. And even when you're doing your own, it kind of reminds me of like when you do household projects around the house. Because it's like if you did some painting, right? You're going to always know there was that one spot that just didn't come out completely right. And especially I think when you're audio editing, you can kind of hear some of those. So I think that's been one thing that I've kind of learned is like, oh, I didn't realize you don't realize some of those things until you're really, really kind of scrutinizing it under a microscope. But I think in some ways too, I've been very pleased with how well I think. I mean, not to toot our own horns too much, but I think we definitely have kind of a natural chemistry back and forth with our guests. And I think some of the dialogues and questions that we get, they're really insightful. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. It's funny. You can, as someone who, now that we've done our own, and you are doing all the editing, so I give you all the credit in the world. But I will say it is funny when you listen to like a nationwide podcast where people are doing this for a living. I think all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden there are things I'm noticing and picking up that they do that I go, wow, yeah,
Mm,
I'm not sure we're there yet. I
yeah.
think there's a lot of work involved, more so than just, hey, let's just get two people and bring on a guest and hit the record button. I mean, we've had, even just honestly, and we've talked a little bit about this, we've had a lot of technical issues where all of a
Mm,
sudden we're with a guest and Ron's audio drops off, right? And it's like, hold on, give us a moment. But I think
yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. I think the original intent of this podcast was, for me at least, was an
Hmm.
opportunity to, hey, once a week, because you and I don't, we try to talk every week, but we weren't always successful at that. Once a
Right.
week, let's get on, let's have a drink, and oh, and by the way, we can bring on another guest, aka a friend of ours who has an
Hmm.
interesting life, and hey, certainly beats sitting inside during COVID and not doing anything, right? Being able to hang out with someone in a virtual way, and it's been fun doing that, and I think we're learning a lot. And you know we have a relatively small listener base, but I think it's a loyal listener base. And
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of people texting me, and I'm sure you have too, that have said, oh, I thought that was really interesting, or I thought that was funny. And
Hmm.
hey, that's cool, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but especially with being at home, we're all not going out as much, right? And I think that's kind of, there's only so much consumption of various media that you can kind of handle, right? And it's kind of neat just kind of having something that's slightly eclectic, like our podcast, where the nature of the guests that we're bringing on every week, it's something different. And I think it's been really cool just to kind of learn and see and kind of grow, I think, in our podcasting journey. But I think in terms of some things that maybe moving forward that I wouldn't mind doing, I think maybe one of the things I'd like to do is maybe have like a question that's a little bit more open ended for all of us as part of some of our new guest sessions going into the double digits. Because I think that was something that some of the guests I've talked to have kind of said at the end. They, as part of our post recap, they're like, oh, I feel like I kind of just mumbled the whole time. And it's like, no, no, no. But yeah, kind of definitely going back to audio editing, it kind of feels like definitely some radio shows where we're doing interviews. But I want to make sure that it's kind of a dialogue with all of us. So
A
even though
back and
there's
forth.
right, so even though there's the specialties that they may focus on, it may be kind of good to then say, okay, well, for all three of us, knowing what we know, what do we think of this? Kind of
Yeah.
more shifting to the view type of discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, actually, I really like that. I think we should try to incorporate more into that for sure. The thing that I think we need to do a better job of is bringing on more female guests.
Yes,
And,
100% there.
and I think we can absolutely do that as we get into the next 10 episodes. Because I think there's just a lot of interesting perspective that we have amongst our female friends
Sure.
that they'd be able to provide. So I think that would be a lot of fun. I think for us, we certainly have a lot of friends that were which is a very good thing.
Hmm.
I am curious at what point we're going to want to say, hey, I know that we still have so many more people to want to interview with us that we want to
Hmm.
interview with, but with some of these guests we did early on, we were just scratching the surface with. Someone
Oh, sure.
you brought up Ruben, right? I mean, Ruben is someone we could talk to him all day about all sorts of different things. So, that's going to be interesting too. At what point do we want to say, well, let's bring some of these guests back on, but we're going to talk about something completely different. It was funny in the last episode what we just did about comics. At one point DC Comics came up because we were talking primarily about Marvel, and of course you said, well, Brandon Rohr, and for those listening, Brandon Rohr was the one that guest in Brooklyn, and we primarily talked about wrestling and growing up in Western New York. He is a huge DC Comics guy. And we
Yep.
actually said in during the interview, we said, "Oh, well, wouldn't it be fun if we were to talk to him about DC Comics and get that different perspective than Marvel?" So, I think that's going to be an interesting point too. At what point do we want to come back and revisit some of these guests and talk about new and interesting things?
Yeah. No, I know that's been something where I think actually all of our guests, I think, have done a wonderful job. And I think that's been something where we've kind of left off with almost all of our guests saying, we got to have you back. And it's definitely something too where, like you said, we've only, I think, scratched the surface. So, as much as I'd love to have, like you said, many of these guests back again because they can talk about anything. On the other hand, it's also like, well, we got to get some of those fresh faces, some fresh perspectives, and a little bit of some different ideas. And to your point earlier, we specifically, I think, we need some more women. And what's interesting too, I'm not sure if you knew this, but our demographics, I think we're at about 30% female listeners, which is kind of surprising. You're all awesome, by the way, but it's also something where we definitely have had way too many dudes on, and I'm not sure. Maybe it's just the title of our show that attracts some women, but
It's
I'm
our
pretty sure that's not it.
it's our voice. It's our soothing
Maybe
voice.
that's it. Our sweet dulcet voices. So with that, I mean, Alex, tell me what are some of your brainstorm ideas for some possible guests in the near horizon, and then I'll share mine.
Yeah, well, when I think about some of my friends and people I know that we haven't brought on yet, one of my friends is a chief investment officer
Mm-hmm.
for a pretty significant investment firm, and with everything going on right now with GameStop and AMC and cryptocurrency, I think it'd be interesting to bring on someone like him, um,
Mm-hmm.
who can give us a little bit of that perspective. I think, I have several friends who have done tremendous pivots in their careers. There was one woman that I used to work with who started out as a geologist and then all of a sudden did a complete switch and got into IT and as a product manager, uh, working with machine learning and AI technologies. So, I think that's really interesting too. When all of a sudden you're 30 years old and say, I'm going to go in a completely different field. And I think it's more common than I think we realize. But what is that journey like? And I think that would be interesting to speak with someone about that as well. How about you?
Hmm. So I've got a few different ideas. I've got a great friend who she's actually a tea expert, and I was thinking, ooh, she might be good. And she's also a photographer. She's done a lot of work for Apple of all customers as well. So she's out in San Francisco, and I think she might be a fun guest to have on. I've also got another friend who she's a nurse coding specialist, which kind of sounds interesting. But it would be kind of cool to talk a little bit about what goes into that whole field of coding, right? And why is the medical industry in the United States such a mess, right? So she's one. I've also got another friend who she worked for, I want to say at least 1 or 2 years at Disney World. And I
Hmm.
would love to kind of just pull apart some of the stories. I know I've talked to her a few times about that. What are some things that she's been doing? And she's got a ton of stories because one of the things I asked her is like, well, do they give you free Botox injections when you're working at Disney so you keep that smile on all day? Because you wonder,
What's the
right?
answer?
She said no. I was a little disappointed, but
Well,
she
that,
said no.
I have two questions. That was one. The other
Hmm.
question is it true that Walt Disney is frozen?
That's I never asked her that. I'm pretty sure Snopes has a good answer on that, but she just definitely. So I think she would be a fun guest. And then I was thinking too, we've got a mutual friend where we've both worked with him, and he lives in Georgia. And if he's listening, you know who you are. I was thinking we could probably get him on because he's got just a ton of really interesting experiences with kind of some of the otherworldly type of things that are out there. So
Well,
I think that'd be fun.
and what I'm most excited for that individual is I want to hear all about the high-end world of golf carts.
Ah, that person also is a huge expert on.
I mean,
So
I'm talking people who spend some serious coin on how they want to transport around their neighborhood. I mean, that's amazing. I love that.
yeah,
I love that. All the bells and the whistles and the lights and the music. I mean, for me, I could listen to a whole podcast just about that one topic.
right.
I promise we won't do that for the listeners, but
I mean, it almost makes me disappointed that where my house is, it's right next to the pool in my neighborhood. But
I'd still get one, Ron, if I were you. I would still get one. I wish right now, as it's -5 and there's 2 feet of snow on the ground, I wish I could go ride around the city of Chicago in a golf cart. I don't think they'd let me.
no, I don't think that they would. But it definitely seems like it would be a fun ride, and it seems like also something that I could imagine on Ferris Bueller if it took place in the summer or in the winter.
Yeah. Hey, so Ron, I thought it'd be good that we kept this a relatively light, short episode. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I am really curious as we kind of wind down. When do you think the next recap episode's going to be?
Hmm.
Are
I
we
don't
gonna
know.
are
I
we
mean,
gonna do every 10? Is the next milestone 20, or do we say nah? We got to wait till 25? When do we do this?
that's a great question because I think it's kind of weird, but it's like we've been doing this for almost a little over 2 months now,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know. I was kind of thinking, 10 seems like a good number just to kind of like recap, to resync. Because I think, if anything, I think one of the things that we have learned is as we've kind of worked through this, we've kind of had to adjust a little bit. But it's also kind of good to kind of give you all, our listeners, a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. Where are we at? And I don't know.
Where we at, as
Where are
Ron
we at?
says. Where we at?
Yeah.
Maybe
Where are
that's
we
the
at?
maybe that's the name of the episode. Where we at?
Where are we at? I'll go with it. Certainly, I mean, if it's 10 episodes, that's 2.5 months of, if we're doing it every week, right? So it's not entirely too soon, but I don't know. It may also be something where we get to 20 and we're like, yeah, let's go on to 30 or something. I think that's kind of the good part about the way our show's been. We've kind of written the rules as we go and we adjust as needed.
Yeah. And I'll say this, for our loyal listeners, if you have any ideas or would like to be a guest on our show, don't be shy. Reach out to us.
Actually, I forgot to mention, I do have another guest that has reached out to me who he's kind of he's been in the Bitcoin space for a long time. Has
What
done a
is
lot of
this
the mining.
Bitcoin, Ron? I don't know. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I think you do, uh, but it's something where he got in pretty early. He's actually run a mining operation for a while, and he's also a listener. And I'm like, you know what? I think it would be fun. He said though the last time he did a podcast, it was not the most ideal of experiences for him. So he just kind of was like, so it might be fun. He's definitely said that from listening to our shows, he's like, I would love to be on that show.
I
So
want to hear about anyone that we bring on who has previously been on a podcast that had a horror story. I want to hear about the horror story. I want to hear about horror stories on podcasts. And who knows, for all we know, our guests go on other podcasts and talk about how we were that horror story. I don't care.
it could be. It could be. I mean, that was something where Mark, I know Mark's been on a few podcasts, and I did ask him, and I'm not going to have him call out anything, but I did ask him. I said, "How did we do?" He said, "Oh, you did great." I was like, "Oh, that's good." I mean, I think outside of Mark and certainly Ruben, I don't know that we've had too many guests that have been on podcasts before, so we're kind of figuring it out. But I'm also like, "Ooh, tell me what we did wrong, so we can make sure we take care of you better next time." And there really hasn't been much feedback, which I think is a good thing.
I'm getting a lot of feedback that our guests want swag, Ron. They want swag.
Yeah. So for things that we need to do, because I know we're kind of getting down toward the end of the time period that we had allotted, I definitely I need to get our website up. I've got the website already registered.
Oh,
And then
what do you have, betweentwostuds.com?
I think it's actually twostuds.com.
Oh, even better.
And I was thinking like the email address between@twostuds.com. Eh?
Oh, I love that.
So, and then what I'm thinking is, yeah, we could definitely probably put some swag out there.
Well,
right?
but I love the between@twostuds email address, because then we can get fan letters, fan emails who can talk to us and ask us questions.
Yes, we need to do that, because it would be kind of cool to have like a guest round at the end where it's like, and now let's get to our fan section.
Exactly.
And so in this place writes us, "Dear Alex and Ron, great show.
And worst case,
please make sure you do this."
Worst case, we just make it. We make up little fake letters. We go, "Hey, this is from John Doe in New York, New York."
John Doe writes, please, 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 please stop releasing it. Sign yours, John Doe.
We'd remember to cut that part out, Ron. You're a good enough editor at this point. We cut that part out.
Okay, I think we can manage that. I think definitely by setting up an email, by setting up a website, and I know this was something that we talked about a little during the break, but I think we also need to get better with our PSAs and our little kind of between content. And I would like to do some cross-pollination with some other podcasts where let's probably pull in some other folks' little, jingles to say, "Hey, check out our podcast." And I think I would also like for us to show up on some other podcasts. Speaking of that,
it's funny, Ron, you and I have talked about a lot of things over the years, but one thing I don't think I've ever asked you is, what do you say? Because I know me, my entire life, and I'm sure you're the same way. People are always a little confused about the two D's in our last name. Right. And I don't know the origin. I've looked into it. I don't have any answers. What do you say to people? I mean, people say, because I've heard it a million times. What's the two D's about? Oh, there's two D's in your last name? Or they spell it STUD and then you say, nah, it's two D's. What do you say to people when they ask about it?
So I like to throw in the Idiocracy reference every
Double
once
dose.
in a while. For the double dose of pimping.
That's exactly what I say. Double dose, the double dose.
And some people will like look it up and they'll be like, "Oh, you're talking about Idiocracy." I'm like, yes. But most people won't. But the few that do, I'm like, "Oh, cool, we're gonna get along."
I say double dose, and then I told that to our father once, and he said, "Oh, well, my whole life I've always said double duty."
Oh, I mean, it's close enough. But I like a double dose of pimping. I mean, that just.
Well, it's fun. I don't go the extra mile. I don't say double dose of pimping. I just say STUDD for double dose.
For double dose.
And I'll let them fill in the blanks, right? I assume they think it's a double dose of stud, or I don't know, double dose of something.
I mean, it depends on the situation, but double dose of pimping, I think, works in some cases for your more familiar friends. But there's a character, so for those that don't know, in the movie Idiocracy, there's a character whose name is Upgrade, and his name is spelled busted. UP
I was actually
Grayed.
just gonna say, I was
Where?
gonna say, Ron, are you gonna say is he spelled thusly? Because that's what they say in the movie, and in the movie, it's
Right.
on a like a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, because the guy's giving like this presentation about the world of pimping and how pimps love, and he's giving this whole presentation before a bunch of military, brass, and they're just kind of like, what the heck? And he's like hanging out with them, and it gets just a little bit obnoxious, and they're like, "Come on, get to the point." And he's just like, "All right, but you got to understand a pimp's game." And they're just like, "Get to the point." But yeah, so in that character's fictitious thing is that he spells it with two D's for an extra double dose of pimping. So, but yeah, yeah. So I think what we need to do though for our episodes kind of going forward is I'm definitely going to be working on some of the in between, mixes. I'm not sure. It would be interesting too once we kind of get some of our emails up and that. I'd be kind of interested to hear some of our fans like, do they enjoy when I do those goofy intros? Like, and I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a certain level of gravitas to them. I don't know that it always makes the most sense. Like, because in some ways it's like, you know what, just get to the episode. But I could also see some like, hey, Ron, that's a really great introduction. Here you go, and get me excited about the guest that you're coming on with. And I don't know, maybe a fun thing too, especially if we're putting these together a week ahead in advance. I might be able to kind of put like a bit of a spoiler or here's a sneak peek of what we have for next week.
Oh,
Something
I'd
like
love
that.
that.
All right. And speaking of next week, I think that actually it's probably time that we wrap this episode up. So thank you for joining me, Alex, and thank you for listening. We'll be back next week, and have a good one.